I think they have the opportunity to win schematically out of 11 and 12, because if they're in 11 or 12, they can get to so much of the menu without having to turn the page. You can do so much from your 12 personnel grouping if you're the Bills, or so much from your 11 personnel grouping. Again, in terms of the run, in terms of the pass, and using those condensed formations, you've got that size advantage if a defense is going to be a nickel. And if they choose to match with heavier personnel, cool. Now we'll shift and let's go spread, because is the bigger body you brought in, can they function against Keon Coleman or against Dalton Kincaid or against Curtis Samuel or against whatever pass catcher we decide to match up with? And then again, if you're going smaller, can you fit up against the run? Having more bodies near the line of scrimmage, you can get to more in the run game. You can get to more gap stuff. You can still do zone. There's so much creative potential. A lot of it just falls on Joe Brady's plate. Can he push the right buttons, pull the right levers, and maximize what this offense has?
You need to be more like a dog. We don't need a bunch of cats in here looking in the mirror. Do I look good? I got my extra bands on. I got my other shoes on. We need more dogs.
And welcome back to the latest and greatest episode of the Shaving Points podcast. I'm Jayton May, joined as always by my co-host Quentin Crisco, and a very, very special guest tonight helping us break down the Buffalo Bills. We have Anthony Prohaska with us. How are we doing that, boys?
I'm doing good. Anthony, how are you doing tonight?
I'm all right. I'm waiting for like NFL training camp to start. We're almost a month away. There's a lot of like hockey's winding down, basketball's done, but then like the draft is happening. I'm a big soccer guy, so it's cool with the Euros and Copa America, and I'm just riding that soccer wave until training camp starts.
I think we jump in on the Buffalo Bills here. Anthony, when you like, I want to say looking at this graphic, but I know you know this team so well, you don't even need the graphic. But what are some areas that you think this team outside of Josh Allen really can hang their hat on and really feel really strong about with this roster?
Man, that's such a funny question, because my go-to answer would have been the offensive line had they not changed anything. And I still kind of feel that way a little bit, even though McGovern moves from left guard to center, and then David Edwards is slotted in at left guard. In theory, granted, some of these things could, potentially change depending on what happens in training camp, positively or negatively. But if we're just talking from a pure area of strength, besides Allen, I'm going to the linebacker grouping. I think they reinforce things overall from a depth standpoint. Like, I know Nicholas Morrow isn't the best linebacker, but having a dude that can be your linebacker 3 or 4 with that still level of athleticism and experience that he carries with him, like even just as recent as his snaps in Philly last year, I think helps. And then the overall competition, they bring in Deion Jones. We'll see what happens with Balen Spector. We'll see what happens with Dorian Williams. But overall, I think there's some nice competition from a depth perspective in terms of functionality. And then above them, I mean, you've got Matt Milano, who's a legitimate all-pro linebacker, and Terrell Bernard, who I think had a tremendous year last year, that in a season that there was so much going on with the Buffalo Bills offensively. And then defensively, it was guys getting hurt, and the storyline with Von Miller. I really think from a national perspective, especially, people have no idea how good Terrell Bernard played last year and how strong of a season he had. I think if he has a season this year like he did last year in terms of that trajectory and that upward swing, you legitimately could be looking at one of the best like linebacker combinations in football. And I know linebacker's not the premium position it used to be, but what they're responsible for in this Bills defense, they're of importance to this defense. And with what Bernard does between the ears from a football IQ standpoint, and then his coverage ability and what he does as a blitzer, I think him and Milano are a real strong 1-2 combination. And then you do have functional depth behind them. You're never going to have all pros as your depth guys, but I think when you look at the group as a whole, there's functional depth throughout it, and then highlighted by 2 really strong players in terms of Bernard and Milano.
I feel like the linebacker, off the ball linebacker, it's not a paid position, but I feel like the teams that have high play at that position always overperform their overall defense. Is when you look at a defense as a whole, teams that have those highly skilled or just really good linebacker cores always seem to overperform, but for some reason or another, it's just not a very highly valued position. But you can see it on the field whenever they are good.
I was about to ask too. I feel like some of it's gotten very scheme specific, where like, you know, you were looking at a big shift to like the Fangio schemes a few years ago, right?
Mhm.
And in those schemes, I felt like there was more ability to kind of hide the linebackers in coverage at times, or hide them in certain areas, maybe against the run, because you have some big monsters in front of them, or whatever they might value. But right now, to me, it feels kind of like there's the teams that are getting to the Super Bowl or near the Super Bowl tend to have some really strong linebacking cores. And part of the reason I'm bringing this up is because McDermott, you know, his scheme, there's some parallels to, you know, my team that I follow, the Bears, to Matt Eberflus's defense, which is very linebacker centric. And the more, like, one of my goals this offseason was to really understand coverages better, because I've always been more of a trench guy. And the more I've been watching the Bears stuff, the more I'm like, I'm starting to really understand how much pressure these linebackers are able to take off the safeties and the corners because of the space they can eat, especially in the middle of the field. Is that kind of what you see with Sean McDermott's defense, what they're being asked to do, or is there anything more intertwined with it that you think you can get in the weeds in?
It's a bit of both, and I think you start with what this Bills defense really has been, going back to Leslie Frazier taking over them, and really, you know, now Chicago Bear, former Buffalo Bill Tremaine Edmunds, when it was Edmunds and Milano in there. And Edmunds is such a polarizing dude for Bills fans, because everybody, yes, like, Bears give him this big contract, and especially after Roquan just goes out the door, and then Roquan goes to Baltimore, keeps balling out, and then you get Tremaine Edmunds, who everything with Edmunds has always been, I mean, you can't even say prototypical size and speed, because it's not prototypical. He's a friggin' pterodactyl, like, out there on the field, and he moves like a gazelle. It's ridiculous. But his instincts, his ability going forward, it was always inconsistent. It was never really what you wanted, but you looked at him from a coverage standpoint, and the one I'm always going to think of is they're playing the the Chiefs in 2022. I mean, the Bills have played the Chiefs like 95 times the last like 4 years. I can't even remember. And Mecole Hardman is in the slot. Mecole Hardman, legitimately one of the fastest players in the league, and he runs a post. And Edmunds turns and carries him and runs with him step for step, like 35 yards downfield. And that's absolutely ridiculous. And he would function so much as this deterrent in that Bills defense because of his athleticism, because of his size, because of his wingspan, because of his speed. He would erase and take away so many things that would allow pressure to get home, or force an underneath throw, and the Bills defense would rally and tackle. And he would do so many things that wouldn't show up on the raw stat sheet, but were so vitally important to the Bills defense. And I think you continue to see that with these McDermott defenses. But also, I think linebacker play in general is starting to come back in terms of importance, because now the teams are starting to run the ball again more, and the running game is becoming more important. Now those second-level dudes, and I'm including like nickel or apex defenders in that as well, because so many teams run nickel, that second level is under pressure all the time. Like, you have to be physical enough and instinctual enough and with a good enough trigger to come forward and play the run, but you also have to be athletic enough and coverage sound enough to function in a variety of coverages. Are you just playing, you know, spot drop? Are you playing match? Are you playing cover 2? Is it Tampa 2? Are you playing quarters? What's your rules system? Like, there's so much that's asked of these guys. And I think the Bills defense was a good example of it, because of all the rules-based nature of their defense and how much of a match coverage defense they were, that, you know, there is a lot asked of these dudes. And for a position I think that kind of gets overlooked, they do go a long way in terms of maybe not necessarily being the splash guys, which Terrell Bernard was more of a splash guy last year for the Bills than Edmunds was, but he played the role a bit differently. I think these guys go a long way towards, like you said, kind of closing off areas of the field or limiting access for offenses. And again, now that the run game is coming in vogue, like, there's just so much asked of them at that second level.
The thing that I just keep thinking about with it is, if your linebacker can cover an extra, 5 square yards of area, that's 5 less square yards that your best athletes on the defense have to worry about, and they get to squeeze less area for them to try to get the football, So these turnover-based defense, I feel like that's how I'm starting to think of the linebackers in these, as they're multipliers out in things that you can't even see or really process out there.
Yeah.
Statistically, and even on tape, it can be hard to see.
I wish I had, I had it in my head for so many years, but like, you could chart Football Outsiders when with Aaron Schatz's DVOA, now it's on FTN Fantasy or whatever it is. But each year with the Bills defense, like using the Bills as an example, each year they got better in the middle of the field DVOA each year with Tremaine Edmonds. And by his second last year with the Bills and last year, they were like the best in the league. Like nothing went over the middle. And then you were looking at the Bills defense, it's like, okay, now you got to throw to the outside. It's like, okay, cool. One of those sides is occupied by Tre'Davious White. So you probably don't want to throw to that side. So now you got to throw to the other side, but we kind of know you're going to throw to that side. So now we can kind of funnel that and play strategically off of that. And exactly, I like your point of kind of looking at it from like a square footage perspective, and being able to take away those areas of the field allows you to scheme up offenses. And even if you can just take away areas and add half a beat or a quarter of a beat to a quarterback's drop back, the difference in them getting the ball out in 2.5 seconds versus 2.75 because they want to pull the trigger, but they don't, that's a huge amount of time. And so I think that position is starting to become of more importance overall again. And, again, we're still seeing the contracts getting paid out to these dudes with what Fred Warner got, with what Roquan got, and then what Tremaine Edmonds got. And it's a sneaky important position. Granted, it's still dependent on the defensive line, open things up for them overall. But if you have good linebacker play, it goes a long way towards kind of pushing you that much farther as a defense.
You get that quarterback to hold the ball an extra few seconds, he's got to deal with Greg Rousseau sooner or later, right? On this defensive line. So I feel like this D-line has changed quite a bit over the last few years.
Yeah.
Where it's like they've been smaller changes, and it hasn't been quite as noticeable because a guy like Ed Oliver's still there. We know Von Miller's still there, but what are you expecting from this
Von Miller still there?
He is still there, yeah. We'll see what version of Von Miller he is, but he is still there.
Well, when I asked that, it was like, when you say Von Miller, you think like, whoa, Von Miller, but is it still Von Miller, or is it just a washed-up edge rusher?
I think his performance last year was disappointing, I would say, but also like I didn't really have a lot of expectations for him. Like the age that he was, coming off the injury that he was coming off of, that same injury he'd had before in his career. Dudes in general, like the first year coming back from that ACL injury, you're really not yourself. It's usually coming back year two that you start to see a semblance of kind of who a player was. And even then it's still asking some. As the year went on, he got better. Granted, it was marginal and it was small increments. And then by the end of the year against Pittsburgh in the playoffs in the wild card round, he's showing some real flashes. And I think having a normal offseason, another year removed from that injury.
Was there a normal offseason?
Well, for him, in terms of like, he doesn't have to worry. It's not a rehab offseason for him. Just gets to, he's just working out and preparing for the season. Granted, it's still probably a little different from workout perspective, but he doesn't have to worry about rehab. He's just prepping for a season like it's a normal upcoming season. I still think your hope, if you're starting with the edge grouping, you're looking at it, and I think Von Miller, the hope, if he can be like, my expectations or even hope for him is being like an edge 3, maybe a low tier edge 2. I just think it's a lot to ask given his age, where he's at, the type of player that he was and what his skill set was, and now coming off of this injury and just fighting father time. I think it's a lot. Yeah. I don't think you're going to see the Von Miller that he was with the Bills before that injury, which was legitimate, like Von Miller.
I think Von Miller in a rotation, if he can give you 30 pressures and 7 sacks in a season, that would be like exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, I'd take it. If he can push double digits or get close to it, that's cool. But then they're going to need somebody to push that envelope, because Greg Rousseau is one of the best run defending edges in the entire NFL. He's been that way since a rookie. As a rookie, he led all edges in stops and stop percentage. Like, he was tremendous. And he's been banged up the past couple of years.
Like and he was young DeMarcus Lawrence.
Oh, man. Oh, nice comp. And he was so raw coming out of Miami. Like, every snap matters to him. And you see it in the pass rush perspective. Like, he's still putting together plan and moves and transitions, and he knows how to use his length. He's smart and he understands leverage. He's got really good hand usage and hand placement, but you're still kind of looking for him to put it together as a pass rusher. I think he's an edge 1 against the run. I think he's more of like an edge 2 as a pass rusher. Like, you need an edge 1 to play off of him from a pass rush perspective. And that's what's scary, about the edge grouping, because you don't have an edge one in terms of a pass rusher. Like, if we're just going right down the list here, it's definitely not Casey Toohill. Like, he's more of like a hustle dude, motor dude who plays the run. AJ Epinesa has flashed and gotten better every single year, and he was starting to really come on last year before he busted his rib against the Chiefs in the regular season, and kind of played, or maybe I don't think it was against the Chiefs, and then played banged up. But his hand usage, his technicality, his moves are really starting to show. But still, I think his ceiling this year is probably an edge too. Dewan Smoot can maybe be fun, and he's another dude coming off of an injury.
His name's Dewan. I'm not familiar. I was really hoping it was Dwayne.
It's always,
I was like, that's the coolest way you could ever. I was like, that's like the coolest way you can spell Dwayne.
I've heard both, and I've watched interviews where people like will be like, I'm here with Dwayne Smoot, and then the next one's like, I'm here with Dewan Smoot, and I'm like, crap. So I'm just going with
right
Dewan.
When you think you got it,
right? You don't. Just when you think you're there, you don't. Like,
I was just hoping it was Dwayne, because I'm like, that is such
it still
a cool
might
name
be.
to
I would
spell
hold
Dwayne.
out hope. You never know. I haven't heard him say his own name. So
I'm a Cowboys fan. If there's one thing I have is hope.
That's all nice. I mean, I'm a Bills fan, so that fits the mold there. And he was sick in 2022, tore his Achilles in week 16. He was a shell of himself last year. He's another year removed. Like, can he be edge 4, whatever for this group? Kingsley Jonathan has some athleticism. You're seeing what he can be. You got Javon Solomon from Troy, who has moves and has plan and has long arms, but is an outlier from a size and weight perspective. Very small. Also doesn't really have that inside move that you would like to have at this point, but he does add legitimate juice. Does he make the group? I think if you're looking at the edge grouping, I like the depth they have. I think they have a bunch of like B- and B guys overall, which is cool. They just don't really have any B+ or above dudes. I think Rousseau flirts between a B+ and an A-, but that's it. Like at best, you've got like B guys after him.
If you can get a lot of B guys to work together,
yes, then that's
sometimes
awesome.
that's the best recipe.
Well,
but you also they all have to work in accordance.
I'm almost realizing just how similar Sean McDermott's tendencies might be to like a Matt Eberflus, because I know Flus wants guys on the edge who are going to contain the pocket and pocket pushers in the middle. And they're really just trying to make the quarterback make a decision so they can try to get the football, is what it feels like sometimes. Is that kind of how you feel about what Sean McDermott has built here, where it's like maybe that they're not the, get home sharks like a Von Miller was, but they're guys who are going to be able to push pressure onto that quarterback, even if it's a little slower, while the linebacker in the middle is making the quarterback take an extra second. And he's having to kind of rush a decision, though, at some point to eventually, hopefully, make a bad decision.
That's been kind of their MO, like with McDermott and Bean. They very much have gone for pocket compressors off of the edge. Like Von Miller, Von Miller is an outlier in terms of the archetype they look for at edge. Even Leonard Floyd is an outlier, who had a really strong year for them last year when they brought him in on a one-year deal.
I was watching their tape and I was shocked that was Leonard Floyd. Like I granted, I'd seen him here and there since he left the Bears, but I could not believe how much that guy has progressed in the last few years.
And this is pure assumption from me. Like as the year went on, once you started to get like week 11, 12, 13, he was getting like helped up off the field. He didn't really miss time, but I'm convinced he was banged up. Like he'd make a play and they would have to scrape him up off the ground. And you see it in the stats, like who he was the first half of the year was a game wrecker. And then he slowly kind of disappeared. I think he was playing banged up, and you can see just by the time playoffs come around, he's getting picked up off the turf. But he, again, archetype outlier. Von Miller, archetype outlier. Like they have gravitated towards dudes like Greg Rousseau and even Smoot, like dudes. They're like, no, just go speed to power, go through a dude's chest or his outside shoulder and shrink everything, and we'll kind of take it from there. They don't look for moves type, skill set, speed, bendy, athletic type of dudes. Like even Javon Solomon was an interesting pick. I didn't have him on the Bills' radar at all because he's an undersized guy from a size and weight perspective. And he's a moves guy. He's not a pocket compressor guy. He's moves and speed and bend and dip, and that's not what they gravitated towards. And it's worked overall from defend the run, make teams beat you, try and contain everything, but they haven't necessarily, like to your point, like had those dudes that could get home. And then they went out and got Von, and then he got hurt. And you're sitting there looking at this group now, and I think you can look at this group and be confident in them, setting the edge, boxing things in, being those force players. But I don't know where your pass rush comes from for this edge group. And you're really hoping Greg Rousseau stays healthy and takes a jump. And then you're hoping Von Miller can get close back to who he was pre-injury. You're hoping AJ Epinesa takes a jump. And granted, those things 100% all could happen, but it's a lot of hope. There's not a lot of known quantity where you're like, this dude is this dude is that, we're good to go. And I love the idea of as a hockey fan, I don't necessarily need a number one line. Give me 4 number 2s, or give me 3 number 2 lines, and my checking line is actually a number 3 line. I love that depth. I love the versatility. I just don't even know if that's a guarantee with the edge grouping and even with the interior to a degree.
Right. And I think it becomes a lot easier when you feel like, you have someone on the overall D line, notably on the interior, who can get home when he needs to.
Yeah.
Is Ed Oliver that guy for you guys, or do you feel like there's any concerns around him in the way that he plays?
I think the only big concern with him, and I'm looking it up right now because I have these stats, because the stats are nuts, and I always forget. I always tell myself to save it in a note sheet, and I never do. There it is. So Ed Oliver this past year, amongst 129 qualifying defensive tackles, he was 4th in total pressures, tied for 5th in pass rush productivity, 4th in hurries, and 4th in sacks. He had a monster of a year on the interior, and that's without his running mate Daquan Jones being in the lineup for most of the year. He gets hurt early on against Jacksonville, and Daquan Jones was putting together, granted it was a small sample size, but he was putting together an all-pro season last year with what he did against the run, what he was doing as a pass rusher. He was looking tremendous, and it was oh my God, look at this 1-2 combo we got. I think Ed Oliver has the ability to game wreck, but what's been unfortunate for him is the past 2 years just kind of disappearing in the playoffs. The Cincinnati loss, I think a lot of it was more coverage based than pass rush based, with how much space they were giving Cincinnati on the outside, and it just let Burrow feed into quick game all night and day. But then the Chiefs game, and it's understandable to a degree because Joe Tooney's fantastic. Joe Tooney erased Ed Oliver the entirety of the game. He didn't.
He's pretty good.
He is fantastic, but if you're also fantastic, you got to win something every once in a while. And he won nothing. There was no tackles, no pressures, no hurt, nothing. You didn't even know Ed Oliver was on the field against Kansas City. And granted, I think some of that is also a product of no Terrell Bernard and no Matt Milano, and Rasul Douglas is hurt, and this other guy is hurt. And this their defense was so banged up. AJ Klein, they called off of a friggin' boat on vacation to come start in that game. They had so many injuries, but I think Ed Oliver is a legitimate impact player, and you just need to see it when it counts the most. Because again, the stats are he crushed the regular season, and even that wild card game against Pittsburgh, 7 total pressures. He was all over again. He plays the run, he plays the pass, 1 gap penetrator, aggressive. But in the biggest moments when they've really needed him, you haven't seen him step up, and I think that's what's kind of holding him back from being more of that superstar type status.
Yeah. So as a Bills fan, how much does it bother you that when Ed Oliver was in college, he stole a jacket from an active teammate during a cold game when he wasn't playing?
I remember that when it happened, and I was kind of just
that's the first thing I think about every time I hear Ed Oliver. They made such a huge deal about it.
The first thing I always think about is he wore number 10 at Houston, and I just thought that was such a baller move for an interior defensive lineman, wearing such a cool number.
It looks like an edge rusher out there.
Kind of does. I remember that being talked about too when he came out. There were even people talking about have him lose a little more weight and have him be an inside linebacker in a 3-4 defense. All this versatility and what he could be. He's made nice progress year after year. And I think if you're trying to hang your hat on something on this defensive line overall, it's Greg Rousseau off the edge as a really strong run defender with the possibility to also be a strong pass rusher. Ed Oliver being a monster inside, and Daquan Jones being a monster inside. You're hanging your hat on those 3 dudes, and then you're hoping you just get functionality and usability anywhere from a B- to a B+ level out of everyone else that you're cobbling together.
Yeah. I just remember you would have thought Ed Oliver committed a heinous crime whenever he was wearing that jacket on the
Can't steal jackets, man. It's bad form, I guess.
Yeah, it was the number one story on every sports station for 3 weeks. Can you believe this guy?
You know someone who would never steal their teammate's jacket? That's Mr. Duke himself, Dwayne Carter.
Oh God, pure leadership like that. I remember the what's his face, Graham Barton, who came out for Duke this year, who was a stud. He was in an interview and he got asked, like, I remember this being told to me. He got asked, like, oh, like, talk about your role as a leader on this team. Yeah, and he kind of like stopped the question right there, and he was like, no, like, our team only had one leader, and it was Dwayne Carter. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, damn, that's pretty sweet. And, his record he fits everything from the Bills model, right? From a play style perspective, one gap penetrator, hustles his ass off, is running downfield, is running dudes down 25 yards downfield on tunnel screens and stuff. And then just, again, like, leader, captain, fits the mold for what you want from a culture perspective. And I think that's kind of important considering how much they've lost from a leadership perspective on this team, but especially defensively. Like, no Micah Hyde, no Jordan Poyer, no Tre'Davious White. Like, you've lost your core leadership group to a degree on the team as a whole, but especially defensively, and they're looking to fill that void. I think Carter slots in as kind of that backup 3-tech behind Ed Oliver. I think you're looking at a top 4 of Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Dwayne Carter, and then the backup 1-tech to Daquan, either being Deshaun Williams or Austin Johnson. I'm thinking it's going to be Austin Johnson just based off the tape from last year, which gives them a fine rotation. Like, if you're trotting out Austin Johnson as your backup 1 and Dwayne Carter as your backup 3, granted, Dwayne Carter is an unknown quantity because we've never seen him play a snap in the NFL. But again, I think you've got good rotation capability on this defensive line overall. The problem is you don't have that top tier or that top shelf level production or known quantity right now. But it can still work out, because if you can get, like you said, like, if you get a whole bunch of B- and B dudes, and even if a couple of them hit a B+, that's awesome. Then you can just roll these dudes out and let them stay fresh and go 100 miles an hour 100% of the time. But it would be nice if somebody ascended.
So you agree with Quentin in his words of solid group, but a lot of mid.
Yeah, I think that's like spot on. Solid group, but a lot of mid in the room. Von Miller needs to regain form in some capacity for this D-line to be a strength. I think overall, yeah, you've got functionality and you've got solid play. There's just, you don't have that top tier nature. You don't.
Full disclosure, you kind of threw me off with that statement, because I was like, wait, when did I say that? And I looked down and see, oh yeah, 2 months ago when I made this graphic, I wrote that.
It's spot on. They don't have anybody. The way that I put it is the defensive line, Ed Oliver's probably the closest to it, but you don't have anybody who can just go get you a bucket. You don't have anybody you're like, right, oh, third down, this guy's going to get a pressure. It's probably Ed Oliver, and I think he's in that conversation right now, but it's not 100% a guarantee. And I think that's what you'd like, especially when you go around looking at a lot of the other teams that you're competing with. Like, you look at Cincinnati and, like, okay, Trey Hendrickson is there. And then you look at Kansas City and it's like, oh, Chris Jones is there. And then it's like, okay, who's that guy for the Bills? Like, it's kind of Ed Oliver. It could be Greg Rousseau. Who knows? Maybe it's both of them this year, but it's still a lot of, like, wishing and hoping and forecasting or wish casting a little bit than it is.
Those are two pretty big names.
Let's talk about the defensive backs a little bit before we close out the defense here. So another room where I feel like there's been a lot of change the last few years between, was it Darius Williams who left, or was that 2 years, multiple years ago?
Levi Wallace was the dude there for years, and then he went to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and then Trey White gone, obviously. Yep. And what do you think about this room now where you're sitting? I feel like, I mean, I felt like the depth is a little thin when I look at it, but I do like the 3 starters. Like, I feel like that there's quality there. But what are your thoughts on these guys?
If you can guarantee me that the starters are healthy for the entire year at corner, I have no qualms at all. I am very cool with Rasul Douglas, Christian Benford, and then Taron Johnson at the nickel. Taron Johnson is one of the best nickels in the entire NFL. He was an All-Pro last year. On any given Sunday, it's between him, Kenny Moore, and Mike Hilton in terms of who the best nickel corner is in the NFL, and I'm fine with him being in that conversation. Dude is an absolute dog coming forward against the run. Like, he plays the run like he thinks he's Tremaine Edmonds' size. Like, he thinks he's 6'4", like 250, and despite the fact that he's like 5'10" and 190. Like, he just hits like a freight train. He fills, he takes on blockers and pullers. It doesn't matter.
That's what you need to do at nickel, though.
That's exactly it.
You got to be fast in that lane. You don't have time to hesitate.
No, and it's so demanding. Like you have to cover that two-way go against a variety of body types now. It's not even like you got to cover a slot receiver. No, teams are putting their number ones inside. Okay, you're playing Minnesota, Justin Jefferson's going to go in there. Oh, you're playing the Rams, Puka's going to go in there. Cooper Kupp's going to go in there. You're playing the Niners, cool. Here comes Debo or Ayuk, or you know what? We're going to put McCaffrey in the slot, or we're going to put Kittle in the slot. Like that position is so demanding, and it's awesome that the Bills have one of the best in the league at that spot, both from a coverage standpoint and from a fit the run standpoint. And if you need to ever watch tape on it, watch the Bills play the Cowboys and watch Taron Johnson just go one-on-one with CeeDee Lamb and just put clamps on him, like rep after rep, and which was, I wasn't even
Don't watch that game.
Sorry. I'm sorry to do that to you. It was fantastic. So good for Taron with that. Rasul and Benford are really
Talking
sweet.
about the Thanksgiving game?
No, the game last year in Buffalo.
Oh.
Yeah, that body. It wasn't
Still
great.
don't watch that game either.
That's fair. I would say don't watch the losses. Never go back. Benford and Douglas are a sweet corner tandem. Christian Benford is another, I think, maybe the best kept secret in Buffalo. 6th-round
He
pick
was
out of Villanova.
Surprising me. I usually watch 2 to 3 all 22 games. I try to make them in division so I don't get too much crossover.
Yeah.
But I kept writing his name down when I was watching him. I was like, okay, Christian Benford. I kept noticing him.
So they took Kyrie Elam in the 1st round in 2022, and then they took Christian Benford in the 6th round. And Kyrie was supposed to be kind of the prince that was promised at that corner spot to take over. And it ended up being Christian Benford. And everybody was just like, where the hell did Christian Benford come from? And he gets better every single game. The biggest issue is, he's had injury stuff, fluky kind of stuff. He's not injury prone, but just like a banged up wrist here and there and different like bone injuries. But he's a legitimate CB2 right now. And by the end of the year, he could be a high-end CB2 or a low-tier CB1. Rasul Douglas is as legit as it gets from a veteran perspective. That was a tremendous trade in season for the Bills last year to get him. He was very much every bit of a CB1. My biggest regret was that he was just playing on one leg against Kansas City. Like, he could not stride out. He was just too banged up. If you give me that core and they're healthy all year, Benford, Douglas, and Taron, I'm very happy with it. The issue is corners get banged up all the time, and everything behind them is questionable. And like you have in the notes there, like a little thin behind the starters, but not enough to be concerned. They're okay. I don't have, like, from an outside corner perspective, I don't have a ton of faith in Kyrie Elam. He's still up and down. Then you're looking at Jamarcus Ingram as your corner 4. He's been more of a slot guy, but now he's projected to go to the outside. What does that look like?
Can I ask you this? Can Taron Johnson play outside? Or is that a no?
Probably not. Like,
Okay.
I know that's been flirted with. He's just he hasn't really seen a ton of time out there, and he's such a focal point and so important with what he does as that nickel defender. Like, I don't even want to risk, like, moving him out there. So if something happens to Benford or Douglas, Kyrie stepping in or Jamarcus Ingram is stepping in, which isn't the worst thing in the world. And Kyrie's made some good plays, but he's still grabby. He's still inconsistent with his footwork. And then behind Taron, we'll see who the backup apex or nickel is. My hope, if anything happened to Taron, is they take rookie Cole Bishop, who I like more around the line of scrimmage than I do as a deep safety, and kind of put him in as a big nickel apex defender. So there's questions there at corner behind the starters, but I feel like that exists for a lot of teams, not just the Bills.
Yeah, and so generally when I'm doing these, I start these right after the draft, and I do every team like over the course of a month. And basically where I end up by the end of it is like, man, there's no team in the league who has corner depth.
Yeah.
Right. So my notes end up being like, they have 3 starters. They're fine.
Yeah,
because it's like so many teams don't have 3 starters. But with you saying about Taron Johnson, that you probably don't want to move him outside, that's where that flexibility, I think, comes into play with a lot of other teams, where it's like you have an outside guy go down, you still feel like you're fine because you can find that nickel guy to off the street, even if you need to give you a few games. Now, looking at the safety position, a lot of change for you guys, right? Two big names in your history out the door. Maybe one still coming back. Is that still up in the air?
There's still kind of like, maybe Micah Hyde comes back. Like, he's been kind of coy about about it when asked. Like, I don't think he does. Like, I don't think he's playing at all. I think he's done in general, but I would say there's a non-zero chance he comes back. But you're probably looking at some combination of Mike Edwards, Taylor Rapp, and Cole Bishop as your starting safety tandem in Buffalo.
And last year they had the 3 safeties there with Taylor Rapp coming into the room. How did they kind of work that? Was there some more dime packages in there for them, or was it really just more like what if someone went down and Taylor Rapp went in?
It was basically that. And Matt Milano went down against Jacksonville. Same game Daquan went down. And what they ended up doing is on known passing downs or known passing situations, Taylor Rapp would come in and play one of the deep safeties with Micah Hyde, and then Jordan Poyer would be that dime linebacker on the second level. If Milano doesn't go down, I really think you're just seeing Hyde and Poyer for the majority of the year, and maybe you get some dime looks or they get creative and Rapp sees some snaps. But if you have a snap percentage up there, like I don't think he comes close to 36% if Matt Milano was healthy last year, which is interesting that they brought him back. Again, it looks like you're going to pair him with Mike Edwards. Like, I don't dislike the safety room. I also don't love it. It's just they've had such high safety play for years, and Hyde and Poyer were really at the forefront of that. There is no free or strong safety. We just have 2 safeties. Granted, Poyer was more strong and Hyde was more free, but they were so interchangeable in terms of how you could use them. You don't necessarily have that now with Edwards and Rapp. Like, they're each more suited for 2 high stuff. You can really use them as a post safety if you're in a pinch and you just want to break tendency, but you don't really have that range and athleticism back there that you necessarily would like. Maybe Cole Bishop adds that, but this is not to knock him overall, but I like him less the farther he gets away from the line of scrimmage. And watching his Utah tape, I loved him in and around the box, sideline to sideline. I liked him best as like a big nickel apex dude where you're blitzing him from the slot. He's fitting the run. He's covering in the flats or hook curls. So I'm interested to see, does he push one of them for a starting job? What's his role? But to your point, it's huge questions in general because either way, you have 2 new starters versus last year.
Yeah, watching safe is always so interesting because, you just start to realize some guys are just not that great at moving backwards and just sitting in space and understanding kind of where they need to shift to. And some guys are just really, really good at moving forwards. And sometimes as simple as that, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I felt the same way about Bishop coming in, but I'm interested to see how this safety room plays out. I think we can get over to the offense here. And I mean, why don't we just start with the big spot, right? It's Josh Allen. Is it
Josh Allen?
I think Josh Allen's the big spot.
I think this receiver room is a bigger spot. I mean, Josh Allen is the big spot, but
let's start with the receiver room then, because I think that plays into Josh Allen well.
I mean, I think Josh Allen is Josh Allen, but you look at this receiver room, I think the Bills were smart on moving Diggs when they did, because I mean, he's an aging receiver. Tell me if I'm wrong, Anthony. Would you say this next season is a win now season for the Bills? I mean, I feel like it's more of a building block with the potential to break out.
I would agree with that. I think this season is more of a revamp than it is a rebuild. And
with the ability to still succeed. I mean, they're not. I wouldn't say they're punting by any means.
No, definitely not. I think they're still. I mean, I'm a wrestling guy, so Ric Flair, to be the man, you got to beat the man. I still think they're the favorite in the AFC East. Where they fit in the AFC as a whole, I think is a much more interesting conversation with how Houston is ascending, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and then Kansas City and even some of the other teams. But I do think they have the possibility to succeed more this year than they're getting credit for, and then really push themselves going forward in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, I really, really like this Bills team, and a lot of people that I've seen think that the Diggs move was kind of like trying to build for 3 to 4 years in the future, when I think it's more immediate than that. You don't want to pay that much to an aging receiver. His production last year wasn't where you want a paid guy to be. Whether or not you agree with why the numbers were what they were, or anything like that. But, I mean, I think it was smart moving on from him. Go get what you can for him. I think he'll be great in Houston as well. I love Diggs. My dog's name is Diggs for his brother. But I look at Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, Matt Collins, Chase Claypool, Andy Isabella. Did they draft anybody?
Keon
Keon Coleman.
Keon Coleman. I like Keon Coleman a lot.
I
But
think
yeah,
he retroactively moved like 20 spots up everyone's draft board once the Bills PR team got a hold of
Right?
him.
He's just been crushing it. He's so charismatic. Like
he's huge.
he is a monster of a dude.
Dude,
And,
he's-
monster personality, monster size.
They used to say about Megatron, it's like he could cover an entire garage door with his
Wingspan, ridiculous in size.
yeah, basically, yeah, like expected completion percentage.
Dude, with Keon, I cannot get his game against Clemson out of my head. Against Andrew Wiggins, like a first-round corner, and he just end of the game
Andrew Wiggins?
dunks on him in the end zone. Was it Nate Wiggins? Sorry,
Nate Wiggins,
Wiggins. I'm getting my sports.
Andrew Wiggins went to
But-
Kansas.
Yeah,
And then Cleveland.
against a first-round corner, Nate Wiggins, and just ends the game dunking on him for just 7 points. Like,
Yeah,
that
in
was
overtime.
I could not look past that. I couldn't push him down my board because of that game. It was like, you can do this.
And his Michigan State tape is littered
Yeah.
with that as well. Like against Michigan and against like top tier teams, like he's just dunking.
I was trying to watch Jaden Reed last year. And I couldn't take my eyes off Keon Coleman. Like, and
Nice.
I like Jaden Reed, but like Keon Coleman was just a whole different level.
It's nuts. My favorite comp for him, Nate Tice, I think, said it on draft night. Like he plays football like Sean Kemp played power forward for like the Sonics, and I was like, that's friggin' spot on. And that can be fun for this receiver grouping because they haven't had a dude like that. Like I've always wanted them to have a ball winner, a big-bodied frame, contested catch type of dude, like a T. Higgins. Granted, T. Higgins is much more than that. He's more complete. But I've always wanted that dynamic present.
Everybody wants a T. Higgins.
Right, everybody would love that. But I've always wanted that kind of dynamic present for the Bills because they haven't had it. But I've wanted it in conjunction with Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley and these declarative separators that they've had. And that is traditionally what killed it with the Bills.
Oh, my
like,
heart.
yeah, I know. I'm sorry. You're a Dallas guy. I forgot.
No. I mean, I loved him on the Bills too. I'm just sad he's not in the game anymore.
Yeah, dude. When he was going, man, like, he was just cooking everybody. And what he and Diggs both had in common, and what worked so well with Allen, was they were guys that could separate anywhere in the route. They could win off the line. They could win in the stem. They could win on the break. And they were declarative separators. They were guys that would separate and basically just stand like air traffic controllers, like waving their hands like, hey, I'm wide open, throw me the ball. And it's not that Allen can't win if he doesn't have dudes like that. We just haven't seen him succeed with pass catchers of any different kind of style.
So I have a hypothetical for you, okay?
I like it.
So Bills start out hot, like say 6-1.
Ooh.
Something happens with the 49ers. I don't know what it is. I don't want to wish injuries on anybody. But 49ers are 3-5, 3-4. What do you get for Brandon Ayuk?
Oh, I have to crunch the numbers again and see if they can even afford it. Like they're so how they have to work.
So it would essentially like be a 1-year rental with the hopes that you can keep him long term. But if the 49ers season is all but done for one reason or the other, and Bills are rolling, what would be too much to give up for him?
Honestly, and I'm looking at the 2025 picks right now because they made so many moves. So they have their first round pick, they have 2 2s, a 3, they have 2 4s, and they have 2 6s. Depending on when you're making it happen in the move, and if it's a pure rental or not, I have no problem. Like I'll give a 4th right now if it's like straight on the rental. If you think that like but if a long-term deal can be done, I have no problem giving up like a 2nd and a 4th and then trying to make that happen.
So I always think back to the Cowboys, Amari Cooper, whenever they traded for him, they were 5-3. Raiders were done. They expected a long-term deal, which they ended up getting done, but it was first-round pick. That was back in 2017, and Amari Cooper did ascend that team much further than probably anybody thought.
Yeah.
Because I hated the trade at the time, and then the production we ended up getting out of Amari Cooper, I'm like, I'll sacrifice that first round pick. And ended up being the safety out of Alabama that got flagged every time he made a tackle. As a fan, not as the analytics side of it or like the numbers side of it, like as a fan making a run, like what are your thoughts if they go give a first for a T. Higgins or a Brandon Ayuk if you're in contention halfway through the season.
Well, as a pure fan, like I'll look past whatever they gave up and be like, oh, sweet, the Bills got T. Higgins or the Bills got Ayuk or the Bills got whatever. Like,
This is fun.
Yeah, I'll just be like, oh, sweet, there's the player. Like, I'm cool with it. I think a lot of that too in that hypothetical, like it depends how they're rolling. Because I think even within that receiver conversation, even though Dalton Kincaid's a tight end, you have to just factor him into the pass catching conversation. And I don't think there's that A1 top tier mouth that they have to feed now that Diggs is gone, but you've got Kincaid and you gave some money to Curtis Samuel and you still have Khalil Shakir and you drafted
I think
Keon
Curtis
Coleman.
Samuel's very underrated, but I feel like he also needs somebody to take a little bit of pressure off him to really perform at his best.
Yeah, I don't think he's a number one. I don't even necessarily think he's a 2. I think he's more of a scheme, like chess piece type of guy.
Right.
Like you're putting him in the backfield, you're putting him in the
I
slot.
think he's the best. I think he might be one of, if not like the best third option you can get in the league. But you have to have 2 true options in front of him to really get that out of him. And that's no disrespect to him, but I think he's like the perfect, like you have either a star tight end or you have a true one.
Yeah, you mean like if you had like, I don't
2.
know, like Stephon Diggs and Dalton Kincaid and then Curtis Samuel, which is why I was like, this is sweet. And then Diggs goes and I'm like, crap.
Right. So
Is Dalton Kincaid that guy though?
How exactly is this going to work with like Dalton Kincaid? I think of as a big slot kind of player, right? Not necessarily your inline tight end, but Khalil Shakir, I think of as more a slot receiver. Curtis Samuel, a bit more gadgety, spent a lot of time in the slot. Keon Coleman, people talked about him as a big slot a lot going into the draft. I can see the vision. I also think he might be able to do some stuff outside at X, but how are you going to get all these? I even think Mac Hollins was a bit of a slot guy. You can probably correct me if I'm wrong on that, but how is this all going to come together in an offense that, there's only one slot receiver?
Well, you're forgetting Chase Claypool. He was very recently traded for a 2nd-round pick. Very, very good player.
Oh boy, I don't want to do the Chase Claypool thing. And
me neither. We don't have to.
Yeah, no, good. I mean, he could make the team as a 6 wide receiver. Like it's 100% possible. I don't know how much burn that 6 wide receiver is going to get, but I think when you look
the press
at
clippings, he could make the team.
Oh god, I don't want to do that. Like I think if you look at the wide receiver room and the tight end room, both of them in conjunction with one another, you're looking at size and frame and athleticism and physicality and the ability to function both as pass catchers and as run blockers. And I think that speaks to the Bills moving in more of a condensed formation direction. When you look at the teams, a lot of like the successful offenses last year, and it's been a trend that we've been seeing in the league year after year with formational width getting lower and lower. But you look at the 5 teams with the lowest formational width in 2023, the Niners were the lowest, Rams were 2nd lowest, Miami was 3rd lowest, the Texans were 4th lowest, and the Lions were the 5th lowest. All teams with good schematic play callers, designers, sequencers, positive offenses in some form or fashion.
Only one or two Shanahan influences.
Yeah, right. Like his tree isn't really anything in the NFL anyway. I think you look towards. I think you look at more of like the Lions and Rams offenses last year, and I expect the Bills to kind of borrow from some of those. The Rams had a 95% 11 personnel usage rate last year. And it's like, oh, yeah, of course, because they've got Puka and they've got Kupp, and it's like, oh, they want to pass the ball. They run the ball a ton out of those formations.
Very successfully, too.
Yes, they do. And they do it out of those condensed looks. And it's because Puka and Cooper Kupp and Van Jefferson before he got traded, and even Tutu Atwell, who's small and a burner, these dudes all block their ass off. And it's not just against, like, nickel corners and outside dudes. Like Puka and Kupp can fit up on a safety or wash down an edge. And even
Puka's a dog.
Yeah, absolutely. And then even in Detroit, Amon-Ra St. Brown is a better blocker than he gets credit for.
I love ASB.
I love Amon.
I love ASB.
Like my fantasy team.
I'm so happy for him to get his money, but I love.
He balled out. My fantasy team last year had Amon-Ra and CeeDee Lamb, so I was just in wide receiver heaven last year with what they were doing. But you look at the Lions. And or Amon-Ra St. Brown is such a great pass catcher and route runner. He's a better blocker than he gets credit for. But the receiver with their second most snaps last year was Josh Reynolds. The receiver with the third most, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Bigger bodied pass catchers who are functioning in condensed formations. Go to the NFC Championship game and watch them run crack toss and watch Josh Reynolds just erase Bosa snap after snap. Yeah. Amon-Ra's fitting up on Lenore, and Gibbs is out the front door. Montgomery's out the front door every single time.
I just got to give a shout out to my dude. You just named those 3 wide receivers, and Jared Goff still went off for all the Jared Goff haters.
That's right. I mean, Goff plays within a good, timing-based schematic system. Ben Johnson took advantage of it.
Quentin hates Jared Goff.
I say exactly what Anthony just said.
I don't love Goff, but if you can allow him to play on time, then he can be successful. He's good. He's a good anticipatory thrower, and he succeeded in Detroit. And I think
he's a dog.
He is a dog. And I think with what the Bills have done, I think you look towards more condensed formations and using your 11 and 12 personnel groupings with those bigger-bodied athletic pass catchers who can also be run blockers, whether it's Curtis Samuel, who is a better blocker than he gets credit for, or Keon Coleman, or Matt Collins, or MVS, or Dalton Kincaid, or Dawson Knox. Shakir's a better blocker than he gets credit for. But you can be an 11 and or 12 personnel you can be an 11 or 12 personnel if you're the Bills, and you can be condensed and run it right down a team's throat. Or you can go in true spread, 2x2 shotgun, or even put James Cook out and go empty. I think they have the opportunity to win schematically out of 11 and 12, because if they're in 11 or 12, they can get to so much of the menu without having to turn the page. You can do so much from your 12 personnel grouping if you're the Bills, or so much from your 11 personnel grouping. Again, in terms of the run, in terms of the pass, and using those condensed formations, you've got that size advantage if a defense is going to be a nickel. And if they choose to match with heavier personnel, cool. Now we'll shift and let's go spread, because is the bigger body you brought in, can they function against Keon Coleman or against Dalton Kincaid or against Curtis Samuel or against whatever pass catcher we decide to match up with? And then again, if you're going smaller, can you fit up against the run? Having more bodies near the line of scrimmage, you can get to more in the run game. You can get to more gap stuff. You can still do zone. There's so much creative potential. A lot of it just falls on Joe Brady's plate. Can he push the right buttons, pull the right levers, and maximize what this offense has? Because there's no walking bucket like Stephon Diggs was. I agree he wasn't what he once was, but down the stretch, he was much better than Bills fans and want to give credit for, and much better than the stats suggest. He's still there cooking L'Jarius Sneed. He's cooking Jalen Ramsey. He's just not getting the ball. It's still going to be a miss. It's a miss they can mitigate if they scheme it up properly, but you have to do it with scheme, because you don't have somebody previously like Diggs or even Beasley where it's a big money down, that dude's getting open, let me throw him the ball. It's a different situation. Kincaid is the closest to that, but he's still not at that level yet.
I like that a lot, and it sounds to me like it's time to buy James Cook in fantasy, if I'm hearing you right.
James Cook, the run game is going to be super, super important for the Bills. They were one of the best running teams last year, not even including Josh Allen. Forget scrambles, forget QB design runs. They were a good running football team, and you add in Joe Brady's ability to scheme up passes for his running backs, something he did with Clyde Edwards-Helaire at LSU, something he did for Christian McCaffrey and Mike Davis at Carolina, and then what he did with the Bills with James Cook and Latavius Murray and Ty Johnson. I would 100% buy James Cook's stock. He's going to touch the ball.
I also like the kid they took out of Kentucky.
Ray Davis, dude, it gets downhill. He's a bit of a hammer, but he also can make you miss in a phone booth, and he's a much better receiver out of the backfield than he gets credit for. He understands timing, when to release. He has a good feel for space. I mean, there's Kentucky tape where he's out there running rail routes in the low red zone and catching touchdowns in the corner. There's a lot of versatility to that running back room as well. And I think you could have a fun 1A, 1B type of a group there with Cook and Davis. But Cook is this offense is going to go through Kincaid.
Don't tell A&M fans that Kentucky was a good ran offense, because apparently their coach is just trash.
They had a good squad there with what they were able to do, especially not being out.
They rioted after trying to hire their coach.
Now, if we're calling Jared Goff a dog
in college,
then Ray Davis is like a goddamn werewolf.
Yeah, bro,
a werewolf.
Yeah, he's not.
He's not equal to
Goff.
It's not even a full moon.
All right, so let's talk a little O-line before we close this thing up. And this is my favorite section of the show every time because I just, for some reason, love to watch offensive line. But what?
Because you have a beard.
I guess so. That's probably it. That's the
prerequisite. Yeah.
So
Bearded and bald.
when I watch this, I think Deion Dawkins he's a pretty surefire bet out there to be a solid to good offensive tackle. Spencer Brown, I feel like his numbers came across really clean here, and I think there's a lot of stuff to like, especially as a run blocker. But I do notice on tape some I don't know if they're mental lapses or what, some more ugly misses at times on occasion. Do you think that's a lot of stuff that's fixable and still developing for him, or do you think it's something that's going to kind of continue to carry through with him, especially in a contract year here?
A lot of when he fails, it's because of poor hand placement. He'll go for a punch, and instead of getting it, right in the center of the chest or chest anywhere, he'll miss and like skim someone's face mask, and then he's caught leaning, and guys by him, and he's beat. A lot of it is because of poor, again, I would say just poor punches in general, whether it's timing or pop. And then sometimes he gets a little, too far over his feet and gets caught, leaning in general, even when it's, separated from the punch aspect. I think he's still, and it's talked about so much, but he's still a work in progress. This was a dude who, his high school football, he was playing 8-man football, he wasn't playing true 11-on-11 ball. Then he goes to Northern Iowa, which isn't necessarily up to snuff from a competition standpoint. Then he opts out with the COVID year. Then he's banged up a bunch his first couple of years in Buffalo. Last year was his first full healthy year. And so I think he's still learning how to play right tackle against good competition. He's doing that on the fly in the NFL. That's very hard. I think the year that he had last year was such a positive because he was such a roller coaster the previous years. You literally had no idea what you were going to get on any snap. And he'd be out in space making a run block that you would go, oh my God, this dude is amazing. And then on the next snap, he's losing in a quarter of a second from a pass rush perspective. And you're like, dude, and he's just getting absolutely waxed. The numbers are good for him. I don't think his tape was as good as the numbers may indicate. They gave him a lot of chip help, either with tight ends or running backs. If they were sending help in general, it was usually towards his side. They had a lot of just alignments and calls up front where Torrance, that right guard, is giving him support inside, so Brown could overplay, the arc. And if anybody spun back inside, cool. Torrance was there to kind of give him that support and always give a little help. I do think it's encouraging the year that he had last year and going into this year. I think he is fit to be a starter. Which is a huge positive because, like you said, on the other end of the line, you've got Deion Dawkins. So I think they're cool at offensive line from a pass rush standpoint. And then also just from a run standpoint, Spencer Brown's athleticism is part of the reason they can be so versatile in the run game. You're not going to see them pulling their guards a ton. You're going to see them pulling their tackles. They're running tackle wrap. They're running tackle pull, that dart concept. And you're going to watch Dawkins pull to one side and Brown pull to the other. And Brown in space is absolutely tremendous. He's so athletic, he's so fluid. That's really what they're going to hang their hat on.
That shouldn't move like that.
No, he should not. He's one of those few dudes who has a 10 RAS score coming out from the combine, and then you watch him move, and you're like, oh, okay, that's legitimate. He's just so athletic and so fluid. And so he's a huge plus in the run game. Part of the reason why their run game is so good is because of Brown and Dawkins, but you've got enough from a bookend perspective. The depth can get a little concerning. I think it'll be interesting to see what they get from Lyle Collins. How healthy is he? What can he be? How much does he offer? Where does he offer it? But I think much like corner, how many teams are really sitting there being like, yeah, we're super cool with our tackle 3 and our tackle 4.
Right.
Yeah.
And then
Lyle Collins he's had moments in a big game.
So you mentioned that they were sending Torrance maybe a little out to help Spencer Brown. Do you think Torrance is a guy who can really afford to kind of give that space and still recover much back to the inside, especially in pass pro?
Well, last year he had the benefit of doing it knowing that Mitch Morse was his center to the left. And Morse is so athletic and he can do so much. It was more it's a 4-man rush and Torrance is kind of attached to Morse here helping, but he's watching over there. And then if anybody comes back inside on Spencer Brown, he's leaving Morse by himself because Morse can do that. And then he's going to go help and give aid to Spencer Brown. He moved much better in space than I thought he would. He lost I don't know how much, but he trimmed down a lot versus what he was in
he
Florida.
beefed up to go to Florida, right?
Yeah.
Like it was I remember watching his Louisiana Monroe tape and then his
Good
Florida
call.
tape. It was like, okay, this is a much bigger dude, and he's not as mobile of a dude as he was.
Absolutely. And so he's still not the most like fleet of foot type of dude, but he trimmed down going into camp last year. I was there on day one, and that was like one of my biggest takeaways was just how, because I saw him in person at the Senior Bowl that year. I was on the field. I was right behind him. And I remember tapping my buddy who I was with, because you could see his gloves. His gloves were size 5XL. And I was like, look at his hands. He's friggin' huge. And I remember standing behind him, seeing how big he was. And that's in February. And seeing how much he trimmed down for July, I was so impressed. And so, again, he's still not the most fleet of foot. You don't want him out in space. But he moved better last year. His whole play is just those vice grip hands. If he gets those paws on you, it's going to be a problem. I think he's still adjusting to NFL speed and NFL quickness, and that's something he's going to continue to have to adjust with. But he's another reason why that Bills run game took off. And when you're talking about strength and power and displacement, you look at the right side of that Bills offensive line, like you just want to run duo to that side because Torrance and Spencer Brown are just going to cave that side in, whether washing everybody out or creating it vertically and just annihilate, dude. Same thing with their pull concepts with like pulling their tackles. You just get O'Cyrus Torrance will just wash somebody down, or if he gets to the second level, he's sealing a linebacker because no linebacker is going through O'Cyrus Torrance. He was a really nice addition. I don't think the Bills thought he was going to be there in the second round. I know I didn't think he was going to be there in the second round. He looks to be a real nice piece. He started to struggle a little bit more as the year went on, but I think you're looking at a dude who's going to be a real solid starter for the Bills for the next several years at guard.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Senior Bowl just for a second, because I remember one of the days I was there that year, sitting right next to a bunch of you Cover One guys and chatting with you guys a little bit. I was wondering if I might have talked to you there that weekend.
You know what's funny is like, you look crazy familiar, and I was like, it's got to be something Senior Bowl related. I know it has to be, and it's possible. I'm horrible with names. I'm better with faces, and the Senior Bowl is like, that was my first year as well, and that year was like a whirling. I felt like I was shaking hands and kissing babies like every 5 seconds with people. And so if someone came and told me right now, like, yeah, man, like we sat and had dinner together, I'd be like, oh, okay. And I'd be like, damn, did we? Like, I have no idea.
Yeah. But so back to the O-line on this. So I believe it's McGovern and Edwards are planned to finish out the last two spots there. How do you feel about where they're slotted in here and expectations for this year for those guys?
I like known quantities. That's just like how I am. And I really liked what the Bills' offensive line was last year, and I didn't want it to change at all. I recognized, Morse, tremendous in space, great mover, not the best anchor, can get driven back into the pocket by dudes with size or power, but I wouldn't have, if you gave me the option to not change anything from the O-line last year, I wouldn't have. So moving McGovern to center is a bit of a change. You lose some of the athleticism that Morse had and the movability, but you gain a better anchor and the ability to kind of maintain the structure of the depth of the pocket a little bit. Also, kind of another domino effect of that, Deion Dawkins had a tremendous year last year, which is a credit to Dawkins. I also think it's a credit to him playing next to Connor McGovern.
It's always the five guys, right?
Absolutely. And that grouping, I think, really had a good chemistry and a good understanding of their roles and how they function together. Like, this was legitimately, especially from a run and pass perspective, the best offensive line Josh Allen has had his time in Buffalo. And they were one of the best O-lines last year, considering what they could do in the run and the pass. Like, their ability to run zone and gap scheme concepts on the ground and function in pass pro, it was truly like awe-inspiring, considering how bad or inconsistent their offensive line play had been prior. So I'm a little concerned just because of the switch. Edwards gave them a lot of value as their 6 offensive linemen. They ran a bunch of 6 offensive lineman sets. I would have preferred him to stay in that role, but I will say what's nice is he's an Aaron Kromer disciple, Aaron Kromer being the Bills' offensive line coach. Edwards goes back to Kromer's time with the Rams. If Kromer trusts him, I trust him. Kromer's one of the best offensive line coaches in football. This is a dude who's been with him for years and years. He understands the philosophy. He understands the technique. If Kromer wants him in there, I trust him to be in there. And so I'm overall fine with it. I would prefer things didn't change, but lo and behold, here we are. I do think that'll end up being the starting 5. I think it'll be Dawkins to Edwards to McGovern to Torrance to Brown, I think there's a small chance that if McGovern doesn't look at center the way you want him to, or Edwards doesn't look at guard the way you want him to, or if Cedric Van Pran Granger, their rookie from Georgia, just balls out and maybe looks so good at center that you just want to move McGovern back to left guard, or somehow like one of those moving pieces allows him to get in there at center. I think there's a chance that can happen. But I think, all things equal, you're looking at a line of Dawkins, Edwards, McGovern, Torrance, and Brown.
Man, I gotta say, Van Pran was always such a Van Pran Granger, I suppose I should say. It was always such a tough prospect for me because I love everything I read about him. I love everything about off the field, on the field, the leadership stuff, and the football IQ is, you hear about how great it is, but I'm not sure if it was Georgia's offense or what, but I always felt like there were big lapses in his play at times. And I always had a hard time knowing what I was going to get out of him there. Did you see any of that, or am I standing alone on that?
No, I think there was some inconsistency to his game. Like I look at his movement and like I think everything was there was a whole bunch of like, oh, this is good, but it could be better, or like this is good, but it's like not great. Like, oh man, look at him climb to the second level, but he doesn't really stay attached and doesn't latch on, and dudes kind of slip off him. Like I will say the experience I think is tremendous. And like his anchor is cool at times, and then also sometimes not the best. But his ability to scan and recognize and pick up games and offer support and get everybody set, I think from a mental standpoint, he's there. I'm interested to see if he can add on a little more weight. Can he get up into the 305s, maybe even push 310 a little bit? But I didn't think he was going to be there in the fifth. I thought he would go somewhere in the fourth, maybe.
Right. He was great value where they got him.
Like, and I'll take that. Like a dude, I think he does have like starting center upside. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be in 2024, but like you said, he's got everything from the mental standpoint, the football IQ. If he can just, and again, I think this is where Cromer comes in. If you can just get that refinement to his game a little bit, he has enough athleticism. He's tremendously smart. He has a ton of experience. Just clean up some of that technique, clean up some of, the bend in his game in terms of doing that instead of leaning more, clean up some of that hand placement. He's already really good at leveraging. Like he understands space and leverage, and I don't have to maul this dude. I can just get here and turn and shuffle, and then I can seal just off of my positioning and my leverage. He's got a good sense of that. And he does have a little bit of a mean streak. Like when he has the opportunity to finish dudes, he will finish dudes, but he just has to clean up some stuff. And I think that's a cool thing that he gets to go to somebody like Aaron Cromer who can potentially clean him up.
Yeah, I almost always wonder with Georgia guys, especially the offensive Georgia guys, how much development is happening in-house there, because it almost feels like they're getting these big freak athlete, 5-star recruits, and just like, hey, just go do your thing, and it's like I almost wonder if some of that was going on with Van Pran, of like, an NFL coach getting his hands on him, he might go a long way.
I think that's a very fair statement. I even think back to like who was the last like Georgia offensive player? I guess maybe not, especially from a skill set standpoint too, that was like just hit the ground running in the NFL, or was this
George Pickens?
Yeah, but he was such a he was hurt.
The physical traits that really he wins with still. Though.
Yeah, but he hit the ground running.
Traits are just that good, like especially on O-line. You'll go like Broderick Jones and Amarius Mims. Neither were drafted on their technician ability. It was just they're different.
And I think with Pickens too, he was like he didn't see a ton of time at Georgia because he was banged up. Like who knows? Maybe if he was regularly playing all the time, then we're sitting here being like, well, of course he hit the ground running. Like I think I guess I should have rephrased it like which regular starter or dude who was seeing a ton of snaps was a regular contributor like right off the bat. Like, and that's why I'm interested to see like what does Ladd McConkey,
Cleveland Browns running back towards ACL. Nick Chubb, he came in pretty strong.
Oh, they've hit. Well, their running backs have hit. I mean, Gurley, Chubb,
running backs different position altogether.
I was gonna say, not to be like rude, like you can take like a 7th round running back from Toledo and like they might hit. Like it's just the running back spot is just. It's crazy how you can just grab a dude and be like, well, let's just plug him in here and then crush it.
2nd round pick out of Memphis. Just go out there.
I almost wonder if there's like a extreme.
You become the man, and then you go to Tennessee a year later whenever you underperform.
I almost wonder if there's an extreme disconnect in NFL scouting. I almost feel like there is with safety to some degree of like just you don't exactly know what you're looking for anymore with some of these positions, so they just kind of fall down the board.
Yeah.
That's fair.
So
Safety's tough too because like college coverages can get really messy in terms of like responsibility or rules based or just like some guys blowing coverage and your college. The safety position is my favorite position, but it's so tough. Like I'll watch coverage stuff and I'm trying to evaluate safeties and I'm just like I'm able to dip into a lot of buckets, but like coverage stuff is my strength. And I'm sitting there
if you could figure out the safety position, you'll have a job for life, brother.
That's fair. Like but you can watch college tape and I'm like, what coverage are they running? Like, what the hell is this? Like, I don't know what's going on here. Because and then it's like, oh,
you think they run coverage in college? You crazy.
But there's some structure going on there, but there's so much like again, some of it is so match based or rules based and different things here and there, but it's such a tough spot to scout. And then running back is interesting now too, especially with how offense is in college football and then how offense is in the NFL and the differing responsibilities and lanes and how you operate. Yeah, it feels like running back and safety kind of get lost in the wash. And that's why these dudes who get taken in rounds 2 through 4 make an impact. And that's everyone's like, oh, where'd this guy come from? And it's like, because there's that disconnect.
Right.
Yeah. So after talking about this whole roster and everything, I mean, I think I'm higher on the Bills now than I have been all offseason. I think you've convinced me that all the pieces are there, missing some spots at the wide receiver position, obviously. But it all comes down essentially to the one guy, your guy, the man out of Wyoming, and his name is Josh Allen. So you talked about the offensive line. I mean, I'm now convinced that we got a top 2, 3, number 1 offensive line in the league right here. So what does our boy got to do here? I mean, I've been long advocate of Josh Allen. I mean, top quarterback in the league. If his name's not Patrick Mahomes, if his name's not Lamar Jackson, I mean, he's right up there with it. So what do we got to do with Josh Allen here to get ourselves in contention to be competing for an AFC Championship, Super Bowl? I think the AFC is the toughest any conference has been. In probably 15 years, this year's AFC. So, I mean, I think if you compete in the AFC, I think it's about 5 or 6 teams that have a true shot at coming out of there, which rarely do you see for a conference.
It's an absolute murderer's row in the conference as a whole. Like, it's tough. And even the AFC East in general, like, I know people kind of poke fun at the Dolphins and Jets.
If Aaron Rodgers stays healthy, Tua is fantastic. That Miami team is nothing to laugh at whatsoever. And who knows? I mean, Patriots hired a defensive coach that went out and got Drake May, who I loved in the draft. I think that defense in Foxborough is going to be tough.
Yeah. I mean, off the bat, when I just like went through the schedules, I had 3 different teams with 10+ wins in the AFC East, and I don't know who to take them away from.
It's possible. Like, and even just, with the Patriots, like, they look to be like 4th, but I think I don't even want to say easily, but I think they comfortably have a top 10 defense already. And that's a defense that could also potentially like get to top 5. They're one of the best tackling defenses in general. Like, you don't get away from their team.
Assuming everything stays put, and obviously I would say the Patriots, the 4th best team in this division. Are they the best 4th place team in a division in the last 25 years?
Wow, really good. No, I don't think so, because I think if you look at the AFC North, like whoever the 4th best team in the AFC North is better than whoever
this year.
Yeah.
So,
like, who's the 4th best team in the AFC North? Probably the Steelers.
I like the Steelers. So yeah, you're right.
But that's what I'm saying.
You're right. Yeah.
If you told me you had like an affinity for the Steelers, so you think, okay, so it's not the Ravens. The Ravens are arguably the best team. Cincinnati.
Bengals. We got the Bengals as the best team in that division.
Bengals have a cupcake schedule this
year.
But
then I'm fine with that too. Okay, so like you want it to be the Bengals.
Yeah, you take them 2 out of it. Browns don't love the quarterback.
No,
don't love the quarterback position there, but great defense,
great offensive line, good run game. Like
Amari Cooper.
You could do a lot worse. you could do a lot worse. Like, so I think whoever the fourth best team in the North is better than the Patriots.
The Patriots. Yeah,
And-
you're probably right. Hey,
Yeah,
Cupcake.
I like that. And so, yeah, even the AFC East is tough. The AFC as a conference is tough.
We've been talking about it since we started breaking down these schedules. Like, if you make the playoffs in the AFC, I mean, it doesn't matter who you are. It's going to be a dogfight, and all roads lead to Patrick Mahomes. I think the Chiefs will win the division, but at the end of the day, Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs is what it's going to come down to. But you look at the Texans, you look at the Bills, you look at the Dolphins, you look at Steelers, you look at the Browns, you look at
Ravens,
the Bengals, you look at the Ravens. I mean, there's nowhere to hide in this conference.
Yeah, no, like, and even like some of the teams that, I don't know, like, are the Raiders who they were under Antonio Pierce last year? Do they continue to be that team? Like, because if they do, they're a problem.
Right.
Like, what do the Chargers look
Hey,
like?
back to back first round picks at tight end.
Right? Like,
They just go out there and ball.
really interesting. Like, I love that combo. Like, cool. Like, so we're just going to roll out Mayer and Bowers, and we're just going to be physical and mash. And like their defense,
Their defense is nasty.
And now finally, Max Crosby has a running mate like Christian Wilkins up front. So now Crosby isn't by
They
himself.
also have a second-year rookie out of Texas Tech that might make the next step.
Oh, I hope he does for his sake. He pissed me off with how inept he looked last year for like the Raiders, especially with how much of the conversation
we were
was
big.
like.
We were big on him. So
that
was a miss on our part.
I think he pissed it. And he didn't do anything wrong, but the amount of people, and I get it because traits and projection and all that kind of stuff.
He's a freak.
He is, but like Will Anderson was such a solid dude, and I feel like people got too cute being like, "Nope, Tyree's ahead of him," and I was like, "No," but
yeah,
I
love Tyree Wilson.
Is a three technique.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
His reps at three technique were pretty nasty last year.
That's fair.
And he's got the body for it.
We're
both Texas Tech guys, so I mean we're both Patrick Mahomes over everybody.
That's fair.
Kinda.
I mean, if Tyree can be something like Divine Diablo was kind of giving you some cool reps last year and fun
weird,
stuff.
but he's fun, man.
Right? He like just what he's become after being a safety at Virginia Tech and now transitioning to like linebacker, like. And then again, we'll see what Harbaugh's Chargers look like. I mean, even the Broncos were like middle of the season flirting with a playoff spot before they fell apart. Like you've got teams
we don't respect the Broncos on this podcast.
That's fair. But you've got teams that can pull like, I don't know, maybe year 2 Anthony Richardson is something, and L'Jarius Sneed is on that defense now. Like
Jaguars with a healthy Trevor Lawrence.
You got the Jags. Like I know the Titans are kind of a joke, but what if Levis can improve a little bit and they kind of re-up a little bit?
Titans got a solid roster.
The entire AFC is a bloodbath.
I swear to God, I do not.
There's
know
nowhere to hide.
Put losses in the AFC right now. Like,
no, the entire conference. Exactly to your point. Like it is a bloodbath anywhere you go. Like each division, let alone in the grand scheme of the conference.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's a less than a 3-game difference between the 2 seed and the 10 seed.
Ooh, I like that. That'd be a cool prop bet. I could see that. Like I think this is one where we're going into like
I think
week
I
16
think tiebreaker is going to come in big time.
Oh, big time, yeah. Conference record will matter.
Like everything, like every game will matter. It's going to feel like a college football season for the AFC because every single win and loss means something according to tiebreakers and everything else, to where it's going to feel like a college football season in that conference this year.
And it's going to be, and there's so many like the matchups, like just from a Bills perspective, the Bills are playing the Chiefs, the Bills got to play the Ravens, the Bills got to play the Texans, like then that AFC South has to play each other, that AFC North has to play each other, like all the inter-division matchups, let alone inter-conference matchups. Yeah, like you're going to go into week 16 and 17 and 18 being like, well, there's like 11 teams that could potentially qualify for the top 8 spots.
Yeah, you're going to see in the hunt, and there's going to be a team last place in their division. Yeah, like there's going to be 3 teams out of it. It's going to be the Broncos. Who else is going to be out of it?
But that's it. Like who else?
Broncos, Titans are going to be the only 2 teams out of it.
And
week 15.
It's so tough, like to even just sit there and say that. And yeah, it's going to be a dogfight in this conference. And I'm interested to see where the Bills like stack up in it.
We can throw Patriots in there.
You can throw Patriots in there too. Yeah,
Broncos, Patriots, Titans are going to be the only only 2 out of it, week 15.
I'm fine throwing the Pats in there. They can burn for all of eternity. Yeah, it's.
I think any casual football fan can agree with that.
That's fair.
They've had their fun.
I'm interested to see what happens with this Bills team. Like, I'm not as high on. Like, I don't think the Bills have a top 2 or 3 O line. I think they could flirt with like a top 10.
No, you convinced me.
But I think
we're putting them top 3.
Yeah, but no way. I didn't even say that. There's no way I could have convinced you of this thing that I didn't say. Like,
your wise words convinced me.
They are a solid starting offensive line. Like, I think they'll be good. Like, they're not inept, and they're not going to be roller coastery, which is more than fine for Josh Allen, who has been one of the best quarterbacks at navigating the pocket and reducing pressure to sack percentage year after year. He had the lowest pressure to sack percentage last year out of qualifying quarterbacks. And I think, like, to what they need to do for him this year, what Joe Brady needs to do for him this year, really just comes down to things schematically. Like, for the joke that I've always given for years was, like, if you opened up the Bills playbook, it wasn't like plays and concepts. It was just different pictures of Josh Allen, like, doing athletic things. And I think this year it needs to be more.
There's worse offenses in the league. Have you
Absolutely
seen
there is. But when you get to the playoffs and your entire resume is on tape and you're going up against Steve Spagnuolo and Lou Anarumo and these coordinators who are tremendous and also know everything about you, you need to be as diverse as possible. And so it's good enough to get through, but when push comes to shove, you see some of that faltering a little bit. Not that Allen's been poor in the playoffs, but you see some of that. You see some of the limitations kind of rear their heads. I think what the Bills really need to do this year to help out Allen and just kind of mitigate the dramatics from all the changes is some of the things that I mentioned, like offensively, lean into those condensed formations, lean into what you built at the wide receiver and tight end room. You have all these body types that are big or long or athletic and can block and can function as pass catchers. Lean into that. Make it so a defense doesn't know, okay, cool, they're in 11 personnel. Yeah, but the 3 receivers are MVS, Mac Hollins, and Keon Coleman. They might just run the ball down our throats. How should we match this? Yeah, but they could also pass out of it. They might come out and spread, or they might, be in like a condensed look, or they might not do either of those things, and it might be an empty, and they're going 3-by-2, and it's going to be, a wheel route to James Cook from the slot up the sideline. Do we have somebody who can cover there? Like, what they've got on offense is a lot of mismatch creators from a skill set plus body frame and type standpoint. It's going to be on Brady to maximize those with alignments, personnel groupings, sequencing, and layering. The run game is going to be important. I think they need more under center play action. I think that's where their explosives are going to come from. I don't think this is going to be a team where Allen's chucking the ball 30 air yards downfield. I think it's more he's firing stuff in the intermediate and he throws it like 17 air yards and there's a broken tackle and that turns into a 25 or a 30-yard gain. Being able to expose the intermediate areas of the field with that under center play action, maneuvering Dalton Kincaid all around, using him in the slot, putting him in line, putting him hipped off of an inline Dawson Knox, using him as a quasi-X. I want to see them lean into more of how Ben Johnson used Sam Laporta last year in terms of pre-snap motion and shifts and using him in any which way possible, leaning into him as the number 1 pass catching option here. And then again, tapping into the size and athleticism as a whole. The run game needs to function heavily, marry the run and the pass. And then defensively, I think the defense may even have more questions just because of how many changes we got going on. And then a new defensive coordinator as well, Bobby Babich. Is he calling plays? Is Sean McDermott going to call plays? How does the defense play in conjunction with the offense? Because if it's a team where it's like, okay, the defense isn't what it used to be, we need the offense to put up 30 points a game. Can this offense put up 30 points a game? And if they aren't confident in the defense, do we see more running of the football? How do we see that complementary football be played out? And how does it all come back to kind of helping out Allen? But there's potential on both sides of the ball. I think there's a lot of questions as well, which really makes the Bills legitimately one of the most interesting teams in the league this year because of who they've been and then what they currently are and how many unknowns there are in terms of what they're going to be this year, and then how important this year is in determining what they are going forward.
I'm high on the Bills now. I wasn't high on the Bills, but you got me convinced. But looking at some futures and prop bets for the Buffalo Bills in this AFC, we have total 12.5. We have over at plus 112. Under minus 138. We have playoffs at minus 184, to make the playoffs, plus 148 to miss the playoffs. Win the division at plus 165. AFC champs at plus 750. Super Bowl at 1,500. If you're betting for value and you have to take one of these bets, which one are you looking at and what are you taking?
Damn. I hate this because I'm also superstitious. The easiest one for me, like, I think the Bills are making the playoffs, so I was going to slam the playoffs one, but then, like, looking at it, that plus 165 for winning the division, I think that is also has, like, if I'm looking at the most likely things of happening, like, forgetting the value, I think playoffs is the first likely thing, and I think winning the division is second most likely, but then the plus 165.
As far as value goes, I think division is the best.
I agree. I'm slamming that all day. And I do think, again, like, I think, again, to be the man, you got to beat the man. I think the Bills will win the AFC East again. I think they fall somewhere between 10 and 12 wins. I think that's what
we're going to pull up where we're at, Q, on these?
Yeah, I've got them at...
Just real quick before we let him go.
I've got them at 10 and 7. You've got them at 9 and 8. But I have a feeling you might switch some of those, Jay.
Yeah. So, can we still be friends if I have you at 9 and 8?
Yeah, I don't care. I'm obviously like a Bills fan, but I'm a football fan first. Yes. And so if I prefer the Bills to win everything, if they don't, it doesn't kill me. If someone doesn't like the Bills, or I get people like do that all the time, be like, "Oh, bro, you like the Bills? I don't like Josh Allen." And I'm like, "All right, I don't care. Like, do you, bro? Like, that doesn't bother me."
To be fair, I mean, I'm a Cowboys fan, but I cheer for Patrick Mahomes probably more so than I should, because he went to Texas Tech. But the third team I cheer for after them is the Bills. So I mean, they're kind of on my list of teams that it's hard to root against the Bills.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly
it. Josh Allen is so much fun, and then they're running the 90s. Bills Mafia is so much fun. Like if I could go to one home game in the league in late November, early December, it's a home game for the Bills.
Especially if you can time it right, where like there's some good snowfall, not where it's like a catastrophe.
Enough snow to have fun.
Yes, and you get those tailgates and everybody's showing up between 8 and 9 a.m. or even some earlier in the night before.
Smothering themselves in mustard and ketchup.
That grosses me out. I am not about that life. Like, I respect what's going on.
I don't want to do it, but like witnessing it would be something else.
I don't want to see it. I don't want to think about it. I'll watch some people go through tables. I watch some people set tables on fire and go through it. I'm down for that. But yeah,
send toddlers through tables.
And hey, man, you got to baptize them by table. And I tell you too, one of the coolest things is, especially if you park in, because you can park in like the lot attached to the stadium and tailgate there, but there's because it's in a suburban area.
Yeah.
So all around it are just tons of neighborhoods and people,
satellite lots and in front of houses.
Yes, parking in driveways, parking in front of houses. And so basically, like, the entire city that surrounds it is one giant tailgate. And then when you make the walk from those tailgates to the stadium, it's just all these cool, different, like, independent merch tents. And some people are selling like legit NFL gear. Some people are selling like homemade retro gear that they make themselves. Like, it's just such a cool atmosphere. And when the Bills are winning and good, it's like there's nowhere else you want to be. Like, sincerely,
surprisingly enough, the Cowboys Stadium's very similar to that. There's a lot of neighborhoods within like walking distance. So
really? I would have never thought of that.
We used to get an Airbnb every year about roughly no more than a mile, but we could be walking up to the stadium from our Airbnb, and every single block you hit, you could walk down the block, tailgate with everybody. Everybody would have the early games on. Cowboys seem to always play on prime time, so it's like we'd be leaving during the 3:00 games, and we could go watch the Eagles hopefully lose. Everybody has beer, everybody barbecuing, but yeah. And then once you actually get to the stadium, it's kind of surrounded by apartments, and everybody that lives in apartments around there are all in their parking lot grilling and everything. Then you get to the actual parking lot, so it's like you're basically pre-gaming all the you're pre-gaming through the tailgates until you actually hit the tailgate scene to pre-game there before you go in the stadium. So actually a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah, well, Anthony, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell everyone where they can find your work again, where they can find you on Twitter, YouTube, anything else you want to push out there?
Sure. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro2_ANT. I host a solo show every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern called Disguise Coverage, breaking down anything and everything Buffalo Bills, but also larger schematic stuff as well, advanced metrics, some game tape and film. I rotate in different guests nationally, locally, people that cover individual teams. I had Mina Kimes on the show recently, so kind of some bigger national people as well. And then I also co-host a show called The Film Room, live every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern, and that's a Bills film show, strictly film, pretty much nothing else. We do a little intro for the first 15, 20 minutes to talk terms and topic and large-scale stuff. And then it's pretty much just an hour and a half of pure X's and O's and telestrations and all that kind of stuff.
And I can vouch for it. I highly endorse it. I was watching a bunch of your YouTube videos over the last 2 weeks in prep for this episode, on top of the film that I was watching on my own. Very good insight, very good interviews. Highly recommend. But thank you so much for joining us, Anthony.
Yeah, man, I had a blast.
Me too. I appreciate you guys inviting me. I was down right away. I appreciate you guys being able to finagle and meet my schedule. And yeah, this was a blast. Anytime you ever want me back, you got me. I had a great time.
All right. Have a great night.
You guys.
So we can just kind of run through this real quick. Week 1, we both have Bills. Week 2, we both have Dolphins. Week 3, I have the Jaguars beating the Bills. Q has the Bills beating the Jaguars.
You know what? I'm changing one. I think. Actually, no. I might change it later. I want to see what I have the Dolphins record at first.
I might give this one to the Bills. I might. That Jaguars game, he's got me fired up for the Bills, man.
Me too, man.
Dude, I was a little bit lower, but it was one of those things where it's man, if to me, he convinced me that this defense is good enough to play good ball, and I mean Josh Allen's gonna do Josh Allen things, so I'm all in now. But week 4, I have the Bills. You have the Ravens. Week 5, I'm gonna give this to the Bills too. I'm gonna give them 11 wins. I needed to take a couple of wins away from the Texans. I think I have them 14 wins, so I'll give them that game. We both have the Jets winning week 6. Week 7, we both have the Bills. Week 8, I have the Bills. You have the Seahawks. Week 9, we both got the Bills. Week 10, I have the Colts. You have the Bills. Week 11, we both have the Bills beating the Chiefs. Week 13, we both have the 49ers beating the Bills. Week 14, I have the Bills beating the Rams. You have the Rams beating the Bills. We both have Lions. Week 15, I have the Patriots winning week 16.
They have to win some games.
They have to win some games, and it's the Patriots Bills. Whenever you turn on Patriots Bills, Patriots find a way to muck it up and win. So I'm taking the Patriots in that spot. You're taking the Bills. Then we both have the Bills last 2 games of the season versus the Jets and Patriots.
So final, you now have the Bills at 11-6, and I have them at 10-7.
I think 11-6. I feel a lot better about 11-6 than I did about 9-8.
Yeah, I think 11-6 is fair. I want to give them 11-6. I'm not. This AFC is brutal.
You play to win the game. Hello? You play to win the game. You don't play to just play it.